Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co-founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. As you're listening to this episode, we are hosting the first ever gathering of our newly minted While We're Waiting vision team. This exceptional team of people has been tasked with planning for the future of the While We're Waiting ministry. When Brad and I and Larry and Janice founded this ministry back in 2011, our plan was to host 2 retreats a year. Well, in the upcoming 2 months alone, there will be 21 While We're Waiting retreats taking place in 12 different states. As this ministry continues to grow at an exponential rate, we want to steward that responsibility well and be sure that While We're Waiting continues beyond us. The vision team will be helping us discern God's plan for the future of this ministry, and we are so thankful for them. Your prayers for their work this week would be appreciated. Now, to today's conversation. My guests today are Marty and Missie Durapau, and if I had to describe the thread that runs through their story, it would be this: still trusting God. Marty had already experienced devastating loss when his wife of 34 years, Angie, died suddenly in 2020. Missy had walked through difficult seasons of her own before she came to know the Lord as an adult. They married in 2023, blending their families and beginning a new chapter. Then, just over a year later, Missy's 14-year-old son, Mason, suffered a devastating brain injury after a golf cart accident on Easter Sunday. For the next week, Marty and Missy worshiped and prayed and believed God for a miraculous healing. But Mason's ultimate healing occurred when he went to heaven on April 7th, 2024. In this first half of our conversation, we'll hear how God brought Marty and Missy together, get to know Mason, a funny, tenderhearted boy who loved Jesus and loved his mama, and talk honestly about trusting God when He doesn't answer our prayers the way we hoped. This is a story of heartbreak, questions, faith, and still trusting God. I believe you'll be blessed by listening in. Hi, Marty and Missy. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having us. We're so excited. I know I am.
Yeah.
Really
Hey,
excited
Jill.
to
How
be
you
here.
doing?
Yes, I'm excited to talk to y'all. I've had the opportunity to get to know you most recently when you came and served at one of our retreats and got to hear a little bit of your story, but I've never heard your full story. So I'm excited to get to hear that this weekend. Let's get started by giving you the opportunity to tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves. Tell us where you're from and what life is like for you there.
All right. So we are a blended family. We were married in February of 2023, so we're still newlyweds. We have 8 children between the 2 of us, 5 grandchildren with granddaughter number 6 on the way in August.
Nice.
Yeah. So Marty has 5 daughters. I have 1 daughter and 2 sons. Mason was the youngest, and we'll talk about him in a little while. We live in Des Allemands, Louisiana, so it's a small town about 20 miles west of New Orleans, so New Orleans area. Marty retired from Dow Chemical in 2017, and I'm a registered nurse. My background is pediatric ICU at Children's Hospital here in New Orleans, and then I did home health for the last 9 or 10 years or so of my career. But I actually just retired May 29th, so that's new.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, and I'll talk a little bit about that probably because that kind of came after losing Mason sooner than expected. We're really active in our church. Marty's a deacon at church. We both serve on the media team. I serve in the nursery and in the Celebrate Recovery ministry on Monday nights at our church. We co-lead Grief Share. Marty actually started co-leading Grief Share about 4 years ago, and then after we lost Mason, he came out of our room one day and said, "We have this program at our church called Grief Share you may be interested in," and I was just like, ha ha ha. So this last semester, we actually co-led it, and the lady that usually leads with Marty did the kids share, so it was the kids portion of Grief Share. So we did that, and then we're the small group ministry directors at our church, so we do that twice a year. And then we recently started doing mission trips. Marty had you've done about 5 or 6 mission trips in the past, and then we went on our first one together last summer to the Dominican Republic, and then we went to Africa this past April, and we are leaving Monday to go to the Dominican Republic again for our third mission trip together.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been new.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's exciting.
Yeah, you guys are busy. That's a lot.
Yeah.
We are busy. We didn't mean for it to get like that. And all of a sudden, and now we moved closer to church. We moved into the house we live in now. And after we got married, and we are 3 minutes from church.
Yeah.
So it's just easy to always be there. And we love our church community. So, and then after Mason went to heaven, he was an organ donor. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But I started volunteering with the Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. You'll hear me say LOPA. That's the shortened version of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that. And so that's about it. Anything else I missed?
Nope, that's good.
Yeah. Well, I can see why you had to retire.
I know it's been 2 weeks, and it has been the busiest 2 weeks I've had in a long time.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And it will continue to be that way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Missy, you didn't grow up in a Christian home. Would you mind sharing a little bit of your testimony with us?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I did not grow up in a Christian home. My parents were divorced when I was 3. I lived with my mom and went to my dad's every other weekend. My parents had a very bitter divorce, and I always felt like I had to keep the peace, kind of choose one side over the other. And I think that had a lot to do with the way I turned out to be as an adult. I always felt like I couldn't let one parent know if I was having fun at one house versus the other, and just people pleasing. And I still, that's one of my character traits I would love the Lord to work on, is people pleasing. My parents both struggled with alcohol. My dad has been sober now for, I think, like 8 years. So that's been really great. But drinking was part of my family life daily. I thought that's how you dealt with life. I grew up Catholic, attended Catholic school until 6th grade, but really we were not practicing. We only attended on Christmas and Easter some years, not even every year. And I never had a relationship with Jesus. And honestly, I didn't even realize that Jesus was a real person that actually walked the earth for 30 years. Like, I'm even embarrassed to say that, but I really didn't. So I had this hole inside of me that I constantly tried to fill with things of this world, mainly men and alcohol, relationships. My adult life was filled with a series of bad relationships, multiple failed marriages, infidelity, physical domestic abuse in one of the relationships. I turned to alcohol to numb the hurt and pain. And then my friend from nursing school, back then she was my partner in crime, my party buddy, she gave her life to the Lord. And then it was years after we graduated nursing school, but I noticed a change in her. And she never beat me over the head with Bible verses or anything like that. She just would let the light shine through her. And she invited me, she invited me to church when her oldest son got dedicated. And so, I just noticed this change in her, just this peace and lightness. I can't really describe it, but I knew whatever she had, I wanted, because I knew her before. And I just saw this subtle change over time. And it was just, it really spoke to my heart. And I knew I wanted whatever it was that she had. So when I walked into the church for her son's dedication, I knew that that's what I had been missing all this time, that it wasn't religion, it was that I found the Lord.
That's right.
Yeah. And so in 2011, I gave my life to the Lord. I was baptized in 2013, but I still remained 1 foot in and 1 foot out until I had my first real encounter with the Holy Spirit, which was on August 31st, 2017. And I feel like my life just started over that day. I was washing dishes in my kitchen, and I was going through a really hard time in my marriage. At that time, the whole marriage was just filled with strife and fighting. And anyway, just in that moment, I was just crying out to God, and I had worship music playing. And I remember this song, it was by Plum. It was called Lord, I'm Ready Now, I think is the name of it. And I just felt the Holy Spirit fill the room. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but I just fell to my knees and just had this encounter that changed my life. And I feel like I never looked back after that. So that's kind of brief testimony of how I came to know the Lord. And, it has not been a perfect walk by any means, but I knew that I'd found what I'd been missing my whole life. So.
I love that. That's a beautiful testimony. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we get into Mason's story, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how God brought the two of you together. Marty, how did you come into the scene here?
Well, as Missy mentioned earlier, we're a blended family because in 1986, I married my high school sweetheart. Her name was Angela Mayu. We called her Angie. And by 2003, we had 5 daughters together.
Yeah. Wow.
In 2017, I retired from Dow, and we were beginning to have grandchildren coming into the picture at that point. And we were looking forward toward our golden years together, with grandchildren and retirement.
Sure.
However, on September 1st, 2020, at the age of 54, Angie experienced cardiac arrest. And I'm the crier here. You can tell,
and
right?
That's okay. That's okay.
She experienced a cardiac arrest, and tragically, she passed away with me and the 5 girls at her bedside. We raised our girls in church. We taught them to read the Bible and have faith in God. So when Angie died so suddenly and unexpectedly, I was faced with a dilemma at that point. Do I pull away from God or do I draw closer to God?
Right.
And I knew in my heart what the correct answer was, that I needed to lead my girls by example because I knew they were watching me, and continue to read my Bible and pray and go to church. But it was tough for me because I was angry. I questioned God's plan for my life. And to be honest, I questioned if he was even real. But I continued to go to church. Wasn't always happy about it because I was angry. And a few times I remember driving to church and yelling at God. And in my truck, I was by myself, and I let him know how I felt because I didn't understand how this was a good plan for my life, because we had our life planned out of what we thought our future was going to be like.
Sure.
And that wasn't going to happen. So it was like we believed in him. We believed in his word. We trusted him. We tried to live our lives for him. And I felt like this is the thanks we get. This is the reward, that Angie died at 54 years old and won't get to see all of her grandkids and watch them grow up. So I would let God know that on the way to church. I'd verbalize it in the truck, and I'd let him know I was mad. I remember at one point telling him, you know what, I'm just going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to let you know because you're a big God and you can handle it, right? And I said, you know how I feel anyway, so I might as well tell you and get it off of my chest.
That's right.
And so I was just real and with God and just let him know how I felt. And then one day as I was sitting alone on my patio drinking coffee one morning, I began to think that, if I die, I'm going to ask God, why? Why did you take her so soon? Why did you take away from her children and me? And why we didn't have more time together on earth? Because I didn't understand. And in that moment, in my spirit, I didn't hear an audible voice from God, but in my spirit, I felt like God might tell me if I asked him that I did give her more time. She was supposed to die earlier, years earlier.
Wow.
And so when I put it in that perspective, it showed me that I needed to be thankful for what we did have and to stop being angry and bitter and resentful for what we're not going to have, in the future. And so it was at that point, that was a turning point for me in my healing process, to be thankful instead of being bitter and angry. So I continued to go to church. Then one Sunday morning in January 2021, I walked into church and I was a little late because I was waiting for one of my daughters to arrive. And so everyone's in church. The foyer was empty. And Missy was serving on the greeting team that day. And she actually wasn't supposed to be serving. She was filling in for someone else who couldn't do it. And when we walked into church, she smiled and welcomed us to church. And I just remember the moment I saw her beautiful eyes and that beautiful smile that I felt like I just wanted to know her more. There was something in me that said, I want to know this girl because she seemed so sweet, happy, and sincere. I could just see it immediately. She just seemed sincere. So after church that day, when I saw her talking with a mutual friend of ours, I reached out to that friend and asked her who she was talking to that day. And I knew she was going to know why I was asking. And she did. So she told me who she was. And it was kind of strange because it's a small church, relatively small church that we go to. And Missy and I didn't know each other. Like, I had never met her. So when I reached out to our friend and she told me who she was, then that's when I wanted to get to know her.
Yeah. And so I'll fill in my side of it because it's just such a beautiful testimony of what God's done, like, in both of our lives. And so I, had gone through a divorce. I got divorced in 2018. Gosh, I can't remember now. I think it was 2018. And I knew I had same kind of thing, like Marty mentioned, after he lost Angie. I knew that my kids were watching, and the way that I'd handled life up until this point was not the way that I wanted my kids to see me continuing on. So I knew I had to be in church. And at this point, I was raising them in church, and they loved going to church. And so anyway, I would go to church, and I just got really involved, more so than I was before. And I'd finally gotten to a point, in fact, it was probably 2 weeks before this moment he was talking about. I worked from home at the time, and I was just in my office working and just really thanking the Lord and crying, just happy tears. I felt so complete. And I just out loud, I was like, Lord, if it's always just me, you, and my kids, I'm fine with that. This is all I wanted in life. I was just at such a good point. The few months before that, a couple of my friends had asked, have you ever considered dating? And I didn't know any of this until we got together, and I look back through my journals. So I always tell people journal. I'm a big advocate for that. But I look back, and they would ask me that. But I was just like, I will not date until hell freezes over. And so, and I said, the Lord would have to drop somebody in my lap, literally. Otherwise, It's not happening. And so I just, on that Friday, I just really, again, it was just another moment filled with the Holy Spirit. And I just was in such a good place. So I went to church the following Wednesday. It was a worship night. And one of my friends, who I'm convinced has a direct line to the Lord, came up to me out of the blue. Nothing was wrong. We had an altar call. I didn't go up because I felt like I was just in such a good place. I was just worshiping, just me, myself, in my spot where I was sitting. And she came up to me from across the church, and she said, the Lord wanted me to come and tell you that he sees you. He's collected all your tears all these years. Keep doing what you're doing. And this time next year, you will not be sitting here alone. And she said, I have so much more to tell you. Come see me after church. Well, I was like, no way. I'm not going to see her after church. So I was trying to leave. She hunted me down. And she told me a little bit. She said the Lord had given her a vision. She wasn't going to tell me anything. She didn't see the man's face. But, she kind of just told me some things the Lord told her. And so I went home and I started praying. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to close off anything you have for me, Lord, but help me to just stay focused on you and not think about what you told this friend. That was about December. And then January, we started our 21-day prayer and fasting as a church. And so I was praying things for the kids. And I just kept hearing that. And I was like, I'm not praying about this. I'm not praying about a man. Like, I refused to. But I said, okay, Lord, if this is what you have for me, I'm not going to close any doors. So I just started praying, Lord, let me be so focused on you that I don't even think about that until I hear you say, look up. Where that came from, I have no idea. But I prayed that specific thing. So about 2 weeks later, I was in church. I wasn't really feeling great. So I'm a talker. I'm sure you'll be able to tell by the end of this podcast. I'm usually talking to everybody at church. And like he said, our church is small. So I didn't know him. I knew of him at this point. I knew there was this man in our church that had tragically lost his wife just months before. But that's all I knew. And so during this service, about 2 weeks after that worship night, I was sitting there by myself, trying to not talk to anybody because I just wasn't feeling great, and just praying. And I felt the Lord say, okay, look up. And I looked up, and he was sitting 2 rows ahead of me. Nobody was in between us. And I just, I laughed out loud. I was like, absolutely not. That is the man that just lost his wife. I will never talk to this man. He is not my type. He's older than me. And I was like, no way. So I didn't tell anybody any of these events. I didn't tell my best friend, the mutual friend he mentioned. I did not tell her.
Well, and come to find out, the mutual friend that she was talking to, I didn't know at the time, but that was her BFF. That was her best friend, like her sister.
Yes.
And I didn't know that at the time.
Right. And so I said, so I'm thinking this time next year, just like my friend had told me. So I'm thinking, oh, great. I have like 10 more months that I have to act normal. Like, what am I going to do? Like we were kids. Sure. I mean, it was ridiculous, honestly. So anyway, I said, I will never speak to him. He will have to come talk to me. And so the day he's mentioning, I wasn't supposed to be serving that morning, but I was, and he came in and I felt those same things. And so I was just like, oh, great. How am I going to act normal around this man till December? Because I'm thinking, literally. And so that evening, after he reached out to my friend, I didn't know any of that happened. I went to her house and she said, you are never going to guess who messaged me asking about you. And I said, Marty. And she said, how do you know? So I had to fill her in all the things that had taken place in my life over the last 2 months. I had not filled her in because I needed to know that it was from the Lord. Yeah. And so I didn't want any outside influence. And so that's kind of how it happened. And then once we became Facebook friends and then we went on our first date, which, by the way, we live in New Orleans and it does not freeze here. It doesn't snow or ice storms. Well, our very first date, there was this ice storm. The whole entire town was shut down. Restaurants were shut down. So pretty much for us, it was frozen over. So I just laughed. I was like, God's got a funny sense of humor. And so, when we got to church, the first time we were there, like in public, I guess, talking together, we were standing by the coffee station for Celebrate Recovery. Actually, I had invited Marty because I said, look, it's for all hurts, habits, and hangups. I know you're going through grief. Why don't you come? I was giving my testimony for the newcomers class that night. I said, just come. And so he was standing there. And so the friend that told me about her message from the Lord came up to me and she said, Missy, I almost passed out. Like, that is the exact vision the Lord gave me when I saw the two of you from behind. Mm-hmm. And so it's just another confirmation that, we knew we heard from the Lord because neither one of us was looking. It hadn't been easy in the beginning of our relationship, dealing with grief and hurt. And so that's kind of how it all happened.
So here you are.
Here we are. And we were married February 16th of 2023. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful story. I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're really here to talk about Mason. I'd love for you to take a few minutes and tell us about him. Help us get to know him a little bit.
No, I'll be the one emotional. So
and that's okay. Yeah. I love to hear the tender parts of your hearts. So just don't let that bother you.
So Mason was my youngest son. He was 14 when he went to heaven. Mason was the biggest mama's boy, and he bragged about it. He knew he would tell everybody, that's his words, that he was my favorite, his words, not mine. But he was big mama's boy. But Mason, Mason was born out of one of the darkest times of my life, put it that way. And he was just such a light, and God really used him and used his life. And so I knew Mason had a calling on his life, like a plan and a purpose. The Lord had a plan and a purpose for his life. I think he was about 3 years old. I remember this so vividly. I wish I could remember what he said, but we were in the car driving one day and he said something that a 3-year-old should not have known. And I said, Mason, how do you know that? And he said, oh, God just told me that. Mm-hmm. And he would just talk about God like he was sitting right next to him, like God was his friend. And so I knew that, that God was going to do something really big with his life. And he loved the Lord from the time he was little. He was goofy. He was clumsy. Oh my gosh, he was so clumsy. He was noisy. And the harder he tried to be quiet, messy. The harder he tried to be quiet, the louder he would get. But he loved football. He loved sports, but his favorite was football and basketball. He played both of those. He tried out for the school sports teams every year. Would never make it. So he wasn't the best player, but he played with all of his heart. So he played for the recreation department and he gave it his all. And he loved God. He loved being involved in children's church. And then when he, aged up to youth group, he was really involved in our youth group. He would teach the Bible study or Bible lesson in children's church once a month. He loved youth camp, and he wanted to be a pastor and an NFL player. He always said he was going to preach to the teammates in the locker room. He was the biggest, he was the biggest Saints fan. I mean, the boy lived, breathed, talked everything football. He knew all the statistics about who was traded to what team and what college they went to. And he would just rattle off football statistics. And I'm like, And, you know, later on he would say something and he'd be like, Mom, I told you that already. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot, you know. But he talked nonstop. The kid would talk to anybody. He never met a stranger. I didn't even realize this until after he passed, but he was the kid at school that would always take up for those that were being bullied, or if they were, you know, struggling with depression or any of those kind of things. A lot of his friends told me after how much he would go out of his way to befriend them. Thank you. And then one of the biggest compliments I got was his principal. So he was in 8th grade when he passed away. And so his principal said that he would always stand outside and greet all the kids as they came in off the school bus. And all the kids had their head down. Nobody wanted to talk to the school principal. I'm sure Brad would appreciate this and know exactly what I'm talking about. But he said he could count on Mason every single morning getting off the bus to give him a fist bump and say, "What up, Mr. G?" Because his principal was Mr. Gutierrez, a.k.a. Mr. G. So that was really sweet. And then one of his football coaches told me he would take a team of Masons any day over the best players because he just had the biggest heart and was like the biggest cheerleader for his team. So that's anything else? I know you have a lot to his little personality.
No, I just remember him coming in from school when he'd always go give his mom a hug, working at her desk. I would usually be sitting on the sofa by that time, taking my afternoon nap, you know. And he would walk in the living room and he'd toss his head back and his bangs would fly up. And he'd look at me and go, "What's up? Sup?"
Yes. He was in that stage where he had to have his hair just right. Mm-hmm. He had like thick, wavy hair. Just the most beautiful blue, clear eyes. And so his hair, he started using hair products in his hair, and just his voice had just started to change. So he had that raspy voice, and just gave the biggest hugs. We went on our honeymoon. We were gone for 2 weeks, and so when we got back, it was a Friday, and we got back while he was at school. And when he got off the bus, now again he was 13 at this time, he just took off running down the street to us and just jumped in my arms. He did not even care, like the kids on the bus were watching or his friends that got off the bus with him. He just loved big. He was not perfect by any means. I always want to make sure I say that because, you know, I'm sure most of us can put our kids that have gone to heaven up on a pedestal. He had issues. You know, he struggled with feeling rejected. His biological dad wasn't really in the picture. So he had a lot of anger issues, and he would punch things for a while. He went through this period where he just really struggled with anger and his temper. But, you know, he was really quick to apologize. He would go in his room and then come out not long after and be like, "Mom, I'm really sorry." You know,
that's the one thing. That's what I was going to share. Like, I saw it one day at Missy's house when I was visiting before we were married, and you know, I saw when Mason would get angry or when something wouldn't go his way and he would throw a temper tantrum. But I told Missy, I said, the one good thing about him is he's always willing to come back right away and say, "I'm sorry, you know, and I messed up." Yeah. And I did notice that about him. Mm-hmm. And it was shortly after we got together. One day I could tell Mason something was wrong with Mason. He was crying or he was unhappy about something. And Missy went in the back room for something at her house. And so I asked him, I said, "Mason, what's wrong? What's bothering you?" And he just shared with me that, you know, he said that he was afraid I was going to leave because most people that came into his life left. And no pressure, right? I mean, and I told him at that point, because I already knew, I said, "Mason, I'm not going anywhere." I said, as long as your mom wants to keep me around, I'm going to be around and I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here for you. Yeah. And I was glad I was able to tell him that.
Yeah, I was really grateful that, you know, Marty was in his life the last 3 years, and he really got to see a God-centered relationship and a godly father, because Marty he treats both of my 2 surviving children just like his. And so I'm just so grateful that the Lord saw fit to bring him into Mason's life, you know, the last 3 years before he went to heaven. So, yeah. But I think that's about it. We hit most of the things. I could talk forever.
He loved my grandson, Rhett, how old was Rhett at that time?
6, 5 or 6.
Yeah, about five or six. Six when we got married.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were going on our honeymoon, my daughter and my son-in-law took him fishing, and they had pictures of him with my grandson. And even though Rhett was so much younger than him, he played with him.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time at our house in Hornville, when he threw a ball or something. It was like a metal ball. It wasn't heavy. It was light, but it hit Rhett and by accident. And Mason cried. Mason just broke my daughter's heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
She felt bad for Mason at that time, but she was so happy that Mason had that kind of heart, that he wasn't, that he didn't just blow it off or try to pretend like it didn't happen or whatever. He knew he had accidentally hit Rhett, and he felt worse than Rhett.
He really did.
Yeah. He had a big heart.
Yeah. It sounds like an amazing young man with a very tender heart. A young man who loved his mama and was thrilled to have a man like you in his life, Marty. What a blessing.
Yeah.
You were to him. Yeah. Now I want to shift our conversation to what happened with Mason in the spring of 2024. Can you take us back to that time and share what your family experienced?
Yeah, sure. So March 31st, 2024, which happened to be Easter Sunday that year, we went to church, and Marty and I were both scheduled on the media team that day. So the kids came to church themselves, I think, for the second service. Anyway, so we went to church like normal. We were going to lunch after, but I just felt this urge to take a picture, a family picture. We weren't dressed in Easter attire. We had our media t-shirts on, but I just felt this urge to take a picture. So we did. We took a picture, and then we went to lunch after. And then it was kind of, I guess, Marty's tradition, like on the holidays, he would go to his daughter's houses, the ones that had kids, and see the children, so that day, see what the Easter Bunny brought them.
Sure.
So they wouldn't have to get out, So Matt, my daughter, and Mason were going to come with us, but they decided last minute to come home. So they came home. We went to see the grandchildren, and Mason went off with his friends riding on the golf cart. And he called me about, I don't know, maybe 5 o'clock that evening, and said that he had fallen off the golf cart and he was really tired. And so we were already leaving to come home. I said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'll come pick you up. And because he was at a friend's house just in the next neighborhood. And so he called me right back about 5 minutes later and said, I fell off the golf cart. Can you come get me? And I said, he had a tendency to be impatient. So it didn't trigger anything for me. I just, yes, we're on the way. We're already in the truck on the way home. We'll be there in a few minutes. And so I picked him up. And when we got home, again, he was maybe 2 minutes from our house. He wanted to see he wanted me to take a picture of his back. And so I took his shirt off, and he had like road rash all over his back. And I said, Mason, what happened? Where did you fall off the golf cart? And he said, I don't know. I don't remember. And I thought he was joking. He was a big jokester. He always was trying to get a reaction out of you. And so I actually, I regret this to this day. I probably will until the day I get to heaven, but I really got frustrated with him, and I said, what do you mean you don't remember where you were? Like, were you on the next street? Were you in New York? Like, where were you? I didn't realize he really, truly did not remember where he was when he fell off the golf cart. Right. And so I said, did it roll over you? Like I was shocked to see the injuries to his back. And he said he had hit his head and that his head was hurting. And so I took a picture of his back. He was completely oriented at the time. So, nurse mode kicked in, mama mode. Yeah. I'm thinking like concussion, and I told Marty if he starts throwing up, we're going to the hospital. So I took a picture of his back. That's our last text message. I texted him the pictures of his back. He sent that to all his friends. He said his head was hurting. I gave him some medicine. I gave him an ice pack. And then he stopped. We were standing right here in the kitchen where we are right now. And he just asked us to pray over him. And I'm so glad that we did. We stopped what we were doing and we prayed over him. And then he wanted to go lay down. So, I said I'm going to check on him every 10, 15 minutes. Well, then he started a few minutes later. He yelled out from his bedroom. And, he came back in and said about his head hurting. And
his jaw.
That was in the bedroom. But he said about his head. And you said, where?
And I asked him, I said, does your head hurt like a headache, or does it hurt where you hit it, the spot where you hit it? And he said it hurts where he hit it.
Yeah, and he did have a knot on his head. So then he was in his room, and so he started yelling about his jaw hurting. And so at this point, I'm like, oh my goodness, probably his jaw's broken. He kept like opening his mouth. And so I was thinking, okay, these injuries, like he's got more injuries than I'm thinking. And so all of this, it sounds like a lot, but it just was like boom, boom, boom. I kind of felt like it was one thing after another. Never enough time for me to think, okay, we need to get him to the hospital. It was just kind of one thing after another. Well, then he wanted to, and I laugh about this, I'm sure he will give me an earful when I get to heaven, but he wanted to go soak in the tub. The boy loved soaking in the tub. As a teenage boy, he loved it. And so that even that did not seem out of the ordinary to me, other than he wanted the water to be cold. And so I thought maybe he was just hot. I wasn't really sure. So I ran this water. He asked me to run the water for him, and he went get in the tub. And Marty, me, and my daughter were sitting in the living room, and he was in the bathroom, and we heard this noise 3 times. And so after the first time, I said, Mace, are you okay? And he said, what? Like he couldn't hear us. And so 3 times. So finally I said, never mind. Well, he got out of the bathroom, and still got out, walked to his bedroom, but I didn't look at him. Marty thinks I wouldn't have noticed with the position where we were sitting, but I feel like I would have seen. So he went to his room, and my daughter went in the bathroom maybe 5 minutes later.
Well, we even asked him on the way to the bedroom, are you feeling better? And he said no.
Right. So at this point, still answering us.
Right.
So my daughter went to the bathroom about 5 minutes later, and this is, another, I feel like just God's, just God's hand in it. My daughter was away at college at the time, but she was home because it was spring break. So just that she was here for this. So she went in the bathroom, and she just kind of said, yelled. And so the bathroom was just a mess. What happened is he had thrown up in the bathtub, and he got out, and just everything was a mess in the bathroom. And so I ran into his bedroom, and he was unconscious, and he was seizing and posturing. And so, I did the whole checked for pulse and breathing, which he had both. And then I was doing the sternal rub, just trying to wake him up, and nothing. He wasn't responding to anything. And then I opened his eyes. And so this whole time I'm just screaming. Marty's praying over him. And I opened his eyes, and his pupils were big. They were fixed and dilated. And I just collapsed, and I just started screaming, I know what this means. I know what this means. I know what this means. And so we called, 911, and so they came, and he never woke up again. They life flighted us to, at the time it was called Children's Hospital of New Orleans. It's now Manning Family Children's Hospital. And the irony in all of this is that's where I used to work, and I worked in the pediatric ICU unit where Mason would die. So we were flown there, and they took him into emergency surgery right away. He had a brain bleed, swelling. He had a stroke. So he had 3 traumatic brain injuries all before he got to the hospital. They were able to stop the bleeding. However, the damage was done. He was on the ventilator on life support, and he just never woke up again. He had another brain bleed about halfway through the week. And that kind of was just, the little bit of brain function he had left that kind of damaged that little bit. So we had a choice to make. And, I'll talk about this maybe a little bit more when we talk about organ donation, but about 6 months before Mason's accident, he noticed the red heart on my driver's license, and he asked me what that meant, and I told him I was registered to be an organ donor. And he said, oh, Mom, when I die, I definitely want to donate my organs. And then 3 months before his accident, Marty took him hunting, and we didn't know this at the time. We found this out months after he passed. Well, in the hospital, when I signed the consent form, he was a minor. I mean, I still had to give permission. But they came in and they said, oh, Mason's registered already to be an organ donor. So we're thinking, did they have some kind of thing at school? Like, how is he, registered? But we found out months later it was when he got a hunting license. So, I knew that we were fulfilling his wishes. I knew all about organ donation. As I mentioned, I worked in the pediatric ICU there. I had taken care of plenty of children that were organ donors. I had been the charge nurse and had to make that phone call many times to the LOPA, Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency, to call in referrals. So I knew the nursing side of it. In fact, I wanted to work for them for a while, but you have to do call. I was a single mom at the time. I couldn't. So it was just this full circle again. Here I was on the other side. So he passed. So his accident was March 31st, 2024, and he passed away a week later on April 7th, 2024. He was able to, we did donate his organs. He saved 5 lives, gave sight to 2, and enhanced the lives of many through tissue donation. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I had not heard your story. I knew it was a golf cart accident, but I had assumed there was some major head trauma and it was instant. I knew that there was a life support process. I did know that much, but I had no idea that he had come home and was communicating and seemed to be fine. There's nothing that would have indicated that this was as serious of an injury as it was.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I remember Missy telling me, if he starts throwing up, we're going to go to the hospital because she was thinking concussion,
Sure.
Within minutes of him throwing up, he went unconscious. So it wasn't like we had time once we knew he threw up.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry that's your story. It breaks my heart that y'all have had to walk through that. What do you remember about those early days of grief?
I feel like it was just a blur. Like I was living somebody else's life or watching somebody else's life unfold.
Right.
I felt like I was underwater, like in a pool, just like looking up, and just everything was muffled around me. Or like it was spinning out of control fast, but moving slow at the same time. It was just the weirdest sensation. And what shocked me so much was, I thought, okay, I'm going to be sad and crying all the time, which I was crying a lot. But the physical symptoms shocked me. The exhaustion. I took a month off of work, but I had to go back to work. Thank God I was working from home. However, when I would get off of work, when I would log off the computer, I would just pass out on the sofa. I was just so exhausted. I had trouble concentrating. I felt like I couldn't even finish a sentence. I would be mid-sentence and wonder, I'd just be like, never mind. It was hard to make simple decisions about like, okay, what do you want to eat? I don't know. Like I could not even think. I didn't know what to eat. And so, that was the main thing for me. I just felt like everything was just, like I was just living in some alternate universe. Like I was just watching somebody else's life. It was just a really weird experience for me.
Yeah.
I just felt like everything was muffled, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. What were your conversations with God like at that point in time?
Jill, the beginning, I feel like I really felt God's presence. And I had no doubt in my mind I had to just fall into the arms of Jesus. Like God has shown me multiple things in the months leading up to Mason's passing. I didn't know it at the time until I looked back. So I knew he was there. When I signed the organ donation papers, it was on that Thursday. And so it was 3 days before Mason actually passed away. Of course, I was believing for a miracle. They put the organ donor bracelet, thank you, on his ankle. And I took a picture of it because I said, when he wakes up in the operating room and freaks out all the staff, God does a miracle. I'm going to show he had the organ donor bracelet on. It was that close. So I still was believing. However, I really knew deep down that he was going to pass away because on that Thursday after I signed the papers, I finally went to take a shower at the hospital, and the Lord gave me a message while I was in the shower and just, about not being mad. And then I prayed for a miracle, and it didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to be, but it was a miracle that he was about to save many lives and that the Lord was going to do a mighty thing through his death, not just with the physical, with the organ donation, but bringing people to know the Lord. In fact, he gave me this whole message. I got out the shower and I just typed it up on my phone, and Marty was finally laying down for a little bit, and he kept saying, like, what are you doing? And I was like, because I just had to get it out. And, and I knew, I knew that the Lord told me I was going to speak that message at Mason's funeral. And so this was 3 days before Mason passed away. So I knew that he was going to pass away, even though I still was believing for that miracle. So I knew the Lord's hand was in it. I knew that I had to turn to him. in December before Mason passed, it was exactly 4 months to the day before he passed away. The Lord gave me a dream. I did not even remember this dream. I wrote it in my journal like I always do. And for some reason, I shared that dream with some of my friends. I never do that. I mean, I never share the journal entry is what I meant to say. But I did. So I didn't even remember this till months later. But I dreamt about, I was chasing this golf cart, running this down this, and that we were in this line, just hugging, telling people, like giving them hugs, kind of like at a funeral when, I thought we were moving is what I thought the dream meant. Anyway, so just that, I was led to lead this year-long Bible study in our home at the beginning of 2023 that I started. We had it here. We had it every single Sunday. I knew that the Lord prepared me for that, and that...
That was 24, right?
24, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah, 24.
24.
Thank you. That year, the year Mason died, I knew that the Lord did that purposefully because my personality, if I was going to lead something, I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to give up because I knew the enemy wanted me to give up. So that was the only way that I was going to stay in God's word was by that Bible study. So I took a month off just like I did with work, but then we picked right back up.
It was the Bible recap.
You probably heard
of it. Yeah,
Tara,
I'm sure.
Tara Lee.
That's a full year.
It is. Yeah. So we did
it.
It's
a full year commitment.
365 days. Yep.
It is. Yeah. So we did it. And I knew that God did that ahead of time to keep me in the word. So I knew he was with me. So I feel like my conversations with God, to get back to your question, were really sweet. And I really felt his presence in the very beginning. There were some times in those early months that I really was mad, kind of like Marty mentioned. I was like, he's just got elected as deacon at our church. We're serving. We are on just about every serve team at church. We're doing all these. We're opening our home to teach a Bible study. And this is how we get repaid? Are you kidding me? And I just felt the Lord tell me, I know that. And I gave my only son for you. I know how you're feeling. And it wasn't in like an ugly, like, strike you down kind of way. It was just in this loving, like, yes, I know you're doing all those things. I know how you're feeling. And so that was kind of in the beginning. I mean, I did have doubts and questions. I'm not saying I walked this perfectly by any means. There were many days that I just was like, Lord, I can't. But I would just play the Bible. I would listen to it. But yeah, that was kind of in the beginning. Then just a lot of days it was just, Jesus, help me. Or I would just repeat, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
And for me, that week that Mason was in the hospital, I mean, Missy never left his side. She was there and loving on him, hugging on him, laying with him. And so we were there the whole week. And I just went back to when I lost my wife because she died. She had the cardiac arrest at 2:40 in the morning. I did CPR on her before the ambulance got there. So she spent the day in the hospital. After they got her, they had her on a ventilator. But we watched her vital signs continue to drop all day long. She never came to again. And by the end of the day, by 6:26 that evening, she passed away. So that day, me and my daughters and friends and family were in the room. We played worship songs and sang. But honestly, quite honestly, I wasn't where I needed to be at that time with the Lord, in my walk with the Lord. She was doing the things, And so when she died, I told my girls, I said, your mom's okay. We know where she's at. She's fine. We're the ones that have to learn to move forward without her. But I felt like maybe we didn't do enough. Maybe I didn't pray right. Maybe I didn't, say the right prayers or whatever. Maybe I didn't have enough faith, and just thinking I should have done things differently that day that we were in the hospital. So when Mason was in the hospital that week, I'm like, we're going to pray. Mm-hmm. When I feel led, God put something on my heart to pray. We're praying out loud. Mm-hmm. We're going to play worship music. We had people coming in. We were making noise in the hospital, singing and playing worship music and praying and just having a faith, trusting, believing that he was going to raise Mason and that Mason was going to be okay. And he wasn't. So here I was again. It's like, where are you, God? Like, it really tests your faith. These things really test your faith to say, all right. And I know it's not about what we do, how we pray. I know that. But it's like, what do we have to do to get a miracle? What do we have to do to see you? Because we just knew, man, if you raised Mason, so many people were praying for Mason. I mean, hundreds, and that's not an exaggeration, hundreds, probably thousands of people were praying for Mason. And they had a worship night at our church one Wednesday for Mason, for people to come and pray and have a worship night for Mason. The church was packed. They had to put people in the foyer. We watched it. We live streamed. They live streamed, and we watched it in the hospital room. And we just knew somebody's got to have faith as the size of a mustard seed, right? Out of all these people,
right?
Somebody's got to. And we just knew, God, if you raise him, what a testimony for you. When Mason comes out of this and walks out of this hospital, what a testimony that'll be. And he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me as well.
That was hard. And another thing that we kind of struggled, or I did, especially with the Lord in those early days, about a week after Mason's funeral, they had another boy in our community, a 5-year-old, that fell off of a golf cart, had a head injury, had brain surgery, and is completely fine. And I just, not that I want any child to die. So if his family listens, that is not what I mean by these words I'm saying right now. I am so grateful that the Lord healed him. It's just salt in the wound for me.
Right.
It was really hard. I was like, really, Lord? That specific exact thing? And he's fine. Thank you. He's fine. But why couldn't you do that for Mason?
Right.
Yeah. And then, but we shared our story, and it was so public. Another mom reached out to me a year later saying that she heard about Mason's accident. Her son was playing baseball, and he collided with another player, hit his head. So they went to the hospital, and, they tried to send him home. They were like, oh, he's fine. And she insisted and told them, no, you're going to do a CT scan. Well, he started having a seizure, and the CT scanner was flown to Children's Hospital, had surgery. Maybe he had surgery. That part I can't really remember. But at Children's Hospital, same neurosurgeon that took care of Mason. And she was telling him, because I think he said, what made you so insistent that he stay? And she told him about Mason's story. And he said, that was my patient. And so the Lord was showing us, it hurts. It does. I mean, I'm so grateful these kids, and I'm so grateful that the parents reached out to me, and I knew this because it does help me on the really hard days. But again, I'm human. I'm a mom. I want my boy back, and I don't understand why some people get answers to their prayers and others don't. So we struggle with that. We're doing all the right things. We're walking the walk. We're sharing. We're giving you all the glory. We would have done it even more had you raised Mason out of that bed, and he didn't. So what are we going to do?
Right.
We have to keep doing what we've been saying all along. But it's hard. It's not easy.
Right. We walked a similar journey with Hannah having cancer. We had a year-long process where we prayed for healing, and we believed God can heal, and we trusted that he would, and her healing ultimately came in heaven. And that's a hard road to walk when especially you see other kids that are healed from their cancer, just like the other little boy in your community with the golf cart accident. And it's hard, and you want to know why, and you don't understand why not your child. But what we had to settle on is that, God knows things that we don't know. And we believe that every day of our lives are ordained before one day came to be. The Bible tells us that in Psalm 139. And God planned for Hannah to live the number of days that he gave her. And we've had to accept that and trust him in that. We don't like it. We don't like it at all. We would change the plan. That's not a good plan, in our opinion.
Right.
But yeah, it is. It's a process that you have to go through, and it takes time.
Yeah. You mentioned that scripture, and Marty said that at one point in the very beginning. He said if we wouldn't have moved here to this house, he wouldn't have been on the golf cart. And it just came out of me. And that's what I tell people so much. That's why it's so important to be in God's word, because the Holy Spirit will bring things to your memory when you need it. And I just automatically said, that's not true. Our days are numbered before we're born. And that was Mason's day. I shocked myself when I said it, but I've held on to that since then. I'm like, okay, if I could say it then when I was numb, I can say it now and believe it, So.
Yeah. And it is a comfort. It is a comfort. So Marty, as a stepdad, where did you fit in on all of this?
It was tough because I felt like I was just starting to know Mason, to truly get to know him in his heart when he was taken away. So the only thing I could tell Missy after we lost him was, I told Missy, I said, I've lost a spouse, and that hurts. But I can't imagine losing a child. I know it's different. So I didn't know what to say. I said, I'll be here for you and with you through it. I mean, even though I looked at Mason as my child, I wanted to do things with him, teach him things as he was growing up, and I wasn't going to be able to do that with him. But I was glad I got to know him for a few years, but I felt like I was just starting to know him when he was taken away. Yeah, sure. And that hurt.
Yeah. I can see, though, that you've been such an amazing support to Missy through all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, he really has. I'm so grateful for that. And honestly, and I don't know if I told you this and I didn't have it prepared, but I feel like it's important to say maybe somebody needs to hear it. I did, again, different conversations with the Lord in the beginning. I thought, Lord, really? You gave me this amazing man, this God-centered relationship. Was that the price I had to pay? Was it my son? Mm-hmm. And so I really struggled with that for a little while. And, the Lord was just, he put in my spirit, no. I knew this was going to happen, and in His sovereignty, I don't have to go through it alone. And I'm so thankful that Marty is here with me. He does. He's so good about supporting me and honoring Mason in every way. And so I'm grateful for that.
And one of the, I think that one of the neat things that I saw, we say God turns ashes into beauty, right? Mm-hmm. When we look back, when Missy and I got together, it was tough on my girls. Because it wasn't long after my wife had passed away that we met. And so it was hard on them. And it was hard on me watching 5 daughters grieving, and I couldn't help them. And then I felt like I was adding to their pain because I was together with someone else. But we knew that God had brought us together. And I even told Missy, I said, I know it's real because you stayed even when you walked into a lioness den. Right. I had 5 grown daughters.
Yeah. Yes.
So she walked into a lioness den and stayed. And I struggled with it a little bit too, thinking, maybe I did it too soon or whatever, but we knew God brought us together. And I even heard someone say once before that when you had a strong, good marriage, most people get married quickly again because they respect marriage. Yeah. And Angie and I were a team. We worked together, and I missed that. And I wanted someone else to be together with, share my life with. So that's the only thing I shared with my girls was that I wanted to be happy for whatever time I have left on this earth, because I don't know if I could be taken away tomorrow. So I want to be happy with whatever time I have left here. Yeah. And so when Mason, it was a struggle for my girls, and but they worked hard to accept it. And, but we were trying to navigate that part of our life, being together and having this blended family and trying to join these 2 families together. And when Mason died in some weird way, I felt like it bonded us a little bit closer, made us closer as a family together, because they had lost their mom. Then we lost Mason. They were doing things to help, like a lemonade stand that the kids did, the grandkids, and they were there for me, at the hospital and still today. My daughters and my grandbabies were doing this lemonade stand to raise money for, and they called it Mason's Miracle Aid. They had a sign, and they raised over $4,000.
Yes, over $4,000.
Yeah, and a lemonade stand, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. So. We knew God brought us together for a reason. As we go through life, we look back and we could see the things that God did, why He brought us together. And but you don't always see it right away.
We're going to pause our conversation with Marty and Missy here for today, and we'll pick it back up next week. In the second half of our conversation, we'll talk about Mason's decision to become an organ donor and the 5 lives he saved, along with some of the unexpected heartbreak that has come along with that. We'll also talk about the realities of the second year of grief, navigating special days, wrestling honestly with God, and the ways Marty and Missy are now using their own losses to come alongside others. Their story reminds us that trusting God doesn't mean we understand what He's doing or that we don't struggle with His answers. Sometimes faith simply means continuing to turn toward Him with our questions, our disappointment, and our pain, and choosing to still trust God. If this episode has encouraged you, would you take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or share it with another bereaved parent? Those simple actions help more grieving moms and dads discover the hope that's found in Jesus. And if you'd like to learn more about the While We're Waiting ministry, visit whilewe'rewaiting.org for information about our retreats, our support groups, and our other resources for grieving parents. It always blesses my heart to meet podcast listeners at our While We're Waiting events, and I would love to see you sometime soon. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to sharing the rest of our chat with you next Wednesday.